But when you're providing a bath, you might as well do the job properly.
An ornamental bird bath like this does more for the cash value of your house than it does for the birds, really. They're very often too deep and too steep. Birds like a gradual approach to just a shallow couple of inches of water. And they need a lot of looking after too. You've got to put fresh water in every day, and in hot weather, there's a very quick build-up of foul-smelling algae. To do the job properly, to provide water for drinking and bathing, you need oxygenating vegetation, and that means a pond.
I've marked the shape of the pond with pegs, but as soon as I've cut the turfs, my enthusiastic son Tim carries them away.
Put it underground then.
It's important to get the outside edge cut correctly, otherwise you'll be in trouble later on with the plastic liner. And it's equally important to dig out the right amount of soil. When the hole's the right shape, you face it with sand. The sand's important because it covers up any sharp stones that might be poking out of the soil.
Put the sack over there.
OK, Tim. Just pat it down nicely. I think we've done now.
Good. Here we go.
Come on.
Now what will we do?
The next job is to unfold the heavy plastic liner and lay it in position squarely over the hole, and then fill it with water. And a few dozen buckets later, it's full. Time to cut off the surplus plastic round the edge and hold it down with some temporary stones and turfs. It'll take a few days to stretch, and it'll need some more buckets of water. But now it's time to add some topsoil, something for the water plants to root into.
Within 2 or 3 months of the pond being built, grass was already growing between the naked stones. And the local blackbird was taking a keen interest.
It's more than 2 years now since we built this pond. My assistant is quite a lot larger. The pond is still the same size, but the vegetation is well and truly taken over. In fact, we have to take quite a lot out, and we supply other ponds. It has given us a tremendous amount of pleasure. Not only the plants, they have rather small flowers, but they're pretty ones, but also the insects, which have taken over and found their own way to the pond. We haven't put anything in. We've had dragonflies and water boatmen, pond skaters, mayflies, things like that. There is a lot of life in there. We did put some tadpoles in, so we've raised quite a lot of toads. But we did it mainly because we wanted the birds to come, and they've come in good numbers. And they use it to good purpose because, of course, they get their feathers mucky every day, and it's an absolutely vital part of a bird's day that it should do its service work, its maintenance on its plumage.
And there's more to bathing than meets the eye. Just look at this robin squatting in the water. The bird creates a shower of cleansing spray by beating its wings and spinning its head, never getting too wet. Water isn't the only medium important to birds in feather care. They'll resort quite readily to dust, allowing fine particles to cleanse grease and parasites from their bodies and feathers. Feather maintenance can involve some curious goings-on. Quick to seize on the opportunity of finding an ant's nest, these starlings leap in, stirring the occupants into a defensive frenzy. Then they carefully take hold of them and place them among their feathers. Perhaps the formic acid and the body oils from the ants kills parasites and later reacts with sunlight to form vitamin D. A bird may have several thousand feathers covering its body. They're crucial for flight and also for insulation, for maintaining its body at a constant temperature. Cleaning these feathers leaves them ruffled, untidy, and less efficient, so the bird must preen regularly as part of its daily routine. Wing and tail feathers prepared for instant flight. body feathers untangled, positioned one overlapping the other to give a sleek shape and protection against extremes of hot and cold. The job will take anything from a few minutes to more than an hour to complete, a necessary daily chore in every bird's survival kit. Hard to imagine, too, that this colourful, feather-like body covering evolved about 200 million years ago from the armour-plating scales of the bird's reptile ancestors. The feather is a bird's secret weapon. It's an engineering miracle, this. Highly complex design. Interlocking barbs and barbules. If they get ruffled and spoiled, the bird can zip them together again so that you've got a complete flying surface on the vanes all over again. It works well. This is a primary flight feather, but there are other kinds of feathers, and it's easiest to see them on a living bird. And with one the size of a mute swan, I need the professional help of RSPB warden Doug Ireland to control it. Lovely. Well, they say that there are 20,000 feathers on a bird like this, but most of them are well and truly out of sight, up against the skin. Down, body feathers, whose function is to trap a layer of air and keep the bird warm, just like a duvet on your bed. Then outside that, there are contour feathers on the outside layer, and they're shaped for aerodynamic flow. Then on the wing, you've got the secondary feathers, which give the bird lift, and primary feathers, which are on its fingers, primary feathers, which allow for propulsion and control, as the tail feathers too, another form of control. So the whole flying suit, the whole plumage, is attached to a rigid but light airframe with powerful muscles set low down, because you need a lot of power to get a bird like this flying. Must weigh nearly 40 pounds, pretty near the limit for a flying bird, really. There, off we go. Of course, the swan hardly notices the weight when it's floating in the water, nor when it's high up in the sky, carried along by casual wing beats. The problems really begin when it wants to get from one to the other during takeoff. Heaving its body clear of the water, pounding along the surface, straining wings to reach the water speed of 10 miles an hour or so, required before it can become airborne. A laborious activity, but once aloft, graceful, gravity-defying. If anything gives birds a supreme advantage over other animals, it's their unique combination of feathers and flight.
Some birds have taken to water as a way of life, and the aquatic life has a lot to offer. On a placid stream or a river, there's a measure of protection from your enemies, and the wealth of vegetation supports a lot of insects and fish on the surface, in suspension, and on the bottom. And you can be sure that where there's a potential food source, there are birds equipped to take advantage of it.
Fish come in all sizes, and so do the birds that feed on them. The kingfisher, 6-inch long, multicolored jewel of rivers and streams. Its entire body goes crashing beneath the surface of the shallows in pursuit of minnows and tiddlers. Larger fish in the same shallows are prey to the heron. Patience is its technique, standing motionless for long periods. Then a few cautious steps before plunging its spear-like neck downwards. The unfortunate fish is tossed up and swallowed whole. A Scottish loch, the water too deep to wade in, the fish too large to be speared by any beak, but still there's a hunter equipped for the job. The osprey with outsized talons. Hooking a 1.5 pound trout with apparent ease and carrying it head on fore and aft to reduce wind resistance back to hungry chicks in the nest. The youngsters will make short work of the fish, needing all the energy they can get to build up muscles that'll take them on their maiden flight to West Africa soon after leaving the nest. There's also a living to be made feeding on underwater insects. It requires a specialized way of life, but it's been perfected by the dipper. Its nest is tucked safely away in a rocky cliff, and while the bird busies itself with clearing up telltale droppings below, it looks very much like a water blackbird or starling. If looks were everything, you might easily not bother to give it a second glance. Although it does seem strangely at home, so close to the water's edge. And water, or at least the riverbed below the surface, is the key to the dipper's existence. Many insects spend much of their lives in water, hidden among protective stones. Caddisfly, damselfly, dragonfly, all growing as larvae or nymphs towards the day they can emerge as flying adults in midsummer. The dipper can survive and raise its young on this abundant food supply, flying underwater to keep its silvery air-trapping body down. Perhaps one reason the dipper doesn't look like a real water bird is that its food is so nutritious it need spend only a little time in the water. One meaty meal goes a long way. Imagine, though, the problems for birds that feed on freshwater vegetation. They show some very watery adaptations. Webbed feet for swimming, and a long neck with a flat, blunt bill for grasping weed in the depths. At least this is how the swan gets its daily ration from a food source which, compared to insects and fish, is poor in nutrition. Shorter-necked mallards upend in the shallows. Vegetation may not pound for pound be as rich as meat, but at least there's lots of it, and it doesn't try to run away. Coots plunge dive for their supper. And it follows quite logically that if you spend all your life feeding in water, you might as well breed there as well. Moorhens peel off strips of reed, which they weave together with fine twigs. The reed nest of the coot. The adult removes surplus egg-chilling water from its body before settling down. It's a bigger, bulkier nest than the moorhen's, often further out in the river, among the outer branches of a fallen tree. Even birds that live permanently in water must wash their feathers if they're to stay fully waterproofed. When they preen, wing and tail feathers are sorted out first, so the bird's always ready to make a quick getaway from danger. Then the body plumage. the thick insulating pile that must be maintained as a barrier between cold, wet water and warm, dry body. Feet reach places that beaks can't. Preening involves more than just straightening out ruffled feathers. For water birds, above all, it means keeping their plumage well oiled, in tip-top water-off-a-duck's-back condition. This moorhen has squeezed a beakful of oil from a special gland and is dabbing it over its feathers. Because they're still wet from bathing, the oil is dispersed among them evenly and efficiently. This preen gland, found only at the base of the tail, is more developed in water birds than in any other kind of bird.
Of course, if you become highly specialized, you may face problems. You may be slow to react to sudden and dramatic changes. Now, for water birds, there can't be anything more dramatic than a prolonged frost, which suddenly freezes the water.
A thick layer of ice won't do coots any harm in evolutionary terms, but for individuals looking for their winter food, it's a bit confusing. For mallards, too, all stranded on solid ground, when their instincts tell them to be bobbing up and down in the water, safe from foxes, weasels, cats and dogs. It seems strange that they don't all get frostbitten feet. Body heat is carried around the body by blood, so water birds restrict the flow of blood to their exposed legs, which get very cold but can still function healthily. The inactivity is over, though, when one of them finds an ice-free patch. Adult swans have been through these conditions before. They can cope far better than their brown-feathered cygnets, facing winter for the first time, swimming but getting nowhere. A woodland pool, frozen solid, yet holding a fascination for the land-based blue tits. In contrast, the rightful occupants of the pond, a pair of moorhens, have been driven out by the conditions. They'll have been able to find some food in the wood, but instinct keeps them returning to their more natural home. It's hard going, and they can feed only round the edge, where the ice is thinnest, broken up by fallen leaves and twigs. The biggest problem of being a bird in winter is keeping the internal heat-producing boilers well stoked. In cold weather, birds naturally lose a lot of heat, too much, and they would die, so the fires need to be stoked with fuel. The energy source is food, difficult to come by at the best of times, nearly impossible for a moorhen when its pond is frozen solid. The species emerges, strengthened by the testing experience. In all its manifestations, water plays a vital part in a bird's life.
Next week's programme shows how to make a nest box in your garden to make discovering birds easier and more rewarding. That's at the same time next Tuesday, 9 o'clock. And Tony Soper has written this fully illustrated BBC book, Discovering